don't do this. I cannot live without your forgiveness. Please, look at me.
You want to kill your husband? He's not earning much money in Canada. This is all he sent me to give you.
They say blood is thicker than water, but sometimes it is the very people who share your blood that will hold your head underwater while pretending to teach you how to swim. It is a painful truth that many realize too late, discovering that the enemy they were fighting abroad was sitting comfortably in their own living room back home. Emeka and Chidinma's love story began in the dusty, crowded streets of Surulere, right in the heart of Lagos. In those early days, they had absolutely nothing but each other and a shared dream. Emeka was a brilliant mechanic, but his hands were always stained with black grease, and his pockets were often empty at the end of the month. Chidinma, a woman whose beauty was only matched by her unshakable loyalty, stood by him without a single complaint. She didn't care about the expensive cars driving past them or the wealthy men who tried to court her. She saw a future in Emeka. When their son, Samto, was born, Emeka looked at the boy's innocent face and made a silent vow that his son would never know the biting, humiliating hunger of poverty. Then the miracle they had been praying for finally happened. Emeka's visa to Canada was approved. It felt like a direct lifeline from heaven. However, the joy was bittersweet because it meant leaving Chidinma and baby Samto behind for a few years until he could secure their permanent residency papers. Before Emeka boarded his flight, he knew he needed a rock, someone trustworthy to manage the heavy sums of money he would be sending back to build their future home and care for his young family. He turned to his older brother, Uncle Chinedu.
Chinedu was a respected elder in the family, the man who prayed the loudest at family gatherings and spoke with gravity. Emeka trusted him implicitly, viewing him as a second father. At the Murtala Muhammad Airport, with tears streaming down his face, Emeka gripped his brother's hand tightly. He begged Chinedu to take care of his wife and his boy, explaining that every single dime he sent would be for their comfort and to build their dream house in Lekki. Chinedu hugged him with immense warmth, telling him to go and succeed, promising that his family would be treated as his own. Once in Toronto, Emeka's life became a brutal, unforgiving cycle of survival. He worked 3 punishing jobs to maximize his earnings. He cleaned dark warehouses in the freezing midnight winter, drove a cab at dawn, and worked a grueling factory shift in the afternoon. His skin was dry from the bitter cold, his back ached constantly, and he barely slept more than 3 hours a night. To save every possible dollar, he lived in a cramped basement and ate cheap noodles day after day. Every single month, like clockwork, he wired thousands of Canadian dollars to Chinedu's bank account. He was sending more than enough to pay for Samto's elite private school, Chidinma's luxury upkeep, and the steady construction of their new mansion. But back in Lagos, a horrific reality was unfolding. While Emeka was freezing and starving himself in Canada, Chinedu was living like an absolute king. Whenever Chidinma traveled across town to Chinedu's house to collect her monthly allowance, Chinedu would keep her waiting for hours in the parlor. When he finally emerged, he would hand her a pitiful amount of money, barely enough to buy a week's worth of basic groceries. When she asked about Samto's school fees or the construction progress, Chinedu would sigh heavily, shaking his head with manufactured sorrow. He lied to her, claiming that Emeka was struggling heavily abroad, that the exchange rate was terrible and life in Canada was a nightmare. He accused her of wanting to kill his brother with endless financial demands. Guilt-ridden and deeply empathetic, Chidinma stopped asking for help. To protect her husband from stress, she quietly pulled little Samto out of his good school and enrolled him in a struggling, overcrowded public school. She started frying plantains by the roadside in the scorching Lagos heat just to feed her son, her hands blistering from the hot oil while she wore faded, torn wrappers. Meanwhile, Chinedu used Emeka's sweat to buy a brand new luxury SUV. He moved his own family into a massive apartment. When Chidinma's phone broke and Emeka shipped a brand new iPhone from Canada specifically for his wife, Chinedu intercepted the package. He gave the expensive phone to his own teenage daughter, telling Chidinma that the shipment had been seized by customs clearance officers. Worse than the theft, however, was the psychological poison Chinedu began to inject into the marriage. To ensure Emeka never questioned why his wife looked poor, Chinedu began planting malicious lies during their late-night phone calls. He would lower his voice to a whisper, claiming he didn't want to break Emeka's heart, but felt obligated to tell the truth. He told Emeka that Chidinma had abandoned her motherly duties, that she was leaving their son with random neighbors to attend lavish parties, and that she was entertaining different men inside the compound. Exhausted, isolated, and emotionally vulnerable in a foreign land, Emeka believed his own flesh and blood. Why would his brother lie to him? The regular phone calls to Chidinma grew cold and accusatory. When Chidinma cried on the phone about their lack of food and clothes, Emeka, believing his brother's narrative, thought she was simply trying to extort him for party money. He yelled at her, calling her ungrateful and materialistic. Heartbroken by the sudden hostility from the man she loved, Chidinma stopped calling altogether. 4 long years passed. Emeka finally secured his permanent residency and saved a massive fortune to return home permanently. But the poison in his heart had festered into deep resentment. He decided not to tell Chidinma he was coming. He wanted to land unannounced and catch her in the middle of what he believed was a reckless, unfaithful lifestyle. He only informed Chinedu of his arrival date. However, a sudden airline rescheduling caused Emeka's flight to land in Lagos 2 days earlier than anticipated. He didn't call a soul. He took an airport taxi straight to the high-end address in Lekki, where Chinedu had been sending him digital photo updates of his supposedly completed mansion. When the taxi pulled up, Emeka's heart swelled with pride seeing the magnificent structure. But when he walked through the front gates, he didn't see his wife or his son. Instead, he saw Chinedu's wife barking orders at a housemaid and Chinedu's children playing with expensive toys in the manicured yard. Confused and alarmed, Emeka confronted Chinedu, who had just stepped out onto the balcony. Chinedu's face instantly turned the color of ash. He began to stammer, claiming that Chidinma had packed her bags and moved out to live a wild life in the slums. Emeka furiously demanded the exact address and drove straight to the location. As Emeka walked down the muddy, narrow pathway of a dilapidated face-me-I-face-you compound, his heart stopped beating. There, sitting on a broken wooden bench in the heat, blowing air into a smoking charcoal stove, was a woman who looked like a hollow shadow of the vibrant wife he had left behind. Next to her was a thin, visibly malnourished boy, sitting barefoot in the dirt with a torn shirt. When Emeka whispered Chidinma's name, she looked up and the metal pot dropped from her hands, shattering the silence. An emergency family meeting was called that very evening inside the living room of the Lekki mansion. Extended family members, elderly aunts, and close neighbors gathered, sensing a massive storm. Emeka sat in the center, shaking with rage so cold it terrified everyone in the room. He demanded to know where all his hard-earned money had gone. Chinedu attempted to maintain his lies, shouting aggressively that at that exact moment, Chinedu's teenage daughter walked into the living room holding the precise model of the iPhone Emeka had shipped from Canada. One of the elderly uncles, looking closely at Chinedu, pointed a finger at his feet. He asked Chinedu why he was wearing the exact brand of designer leather shoes that Emeka had proudly mentioned shipping down for Chidinma's aging father. The room erupted into total chaos. The web of lies shattered completely like cheap glass. Every single dollar Emeka had bled for in the Canadian snow, every hour of sleep he had sacrificed, had been stolen to build Chinedu's comfortable lifestyle, while his own flesh and blood nearly starved to death in a slum. Emeka fell to his knees on the polished floor, weeping openly and heavily. He looked up at Chidinma, who stood tall and unbroken despite her worn clothes. He realized with agonizing clarity that he had believed a monster simply because the monster shared his bloodline. Emeka severed all communication with Chinedu immediately. He used legal means to strip his brother of the mansion, the luxury cars, and every asset built with the stolen funds, leaving Chinedu to face the ultimate public shame of a ruined reputation. It took months of consistent, patient humility for Emeka to earn back Chidinma's trust. He understood that 4 years of psychological abandonment could not be erased by a simple apology. He dedicated every single day to proving his loyalty and healing the wounds of the past. Eventually, Emeka, Chidinma, and a healthy, smiling Samto boarded a flight back to Canada together, leaving the toxic betrayal behind them for good. The old elders always say that the insect eating the vegetable lives right inside the vegetable. It is a reminder to protect your peace, watch your back, and realize that sometimes the people who smile the brightest in your presence are the very ones digging a grave for your future.